friends. I suppose one of the reasons why Cain turned out badly was because there had been no books on child psychology written in his time. Those who have read many psychologies, I suppose, have become convinced, as most of us have, that during the last 10 or 20 years they've been written for abnormal people. How would you like to hear a little psychology for normal people like yourselves? There are 10,000 people that are running toward an abyss, and one man runs from it. He seems to the others to be in flight. And when indeed there are so many abnormalities, it behooves us to recall that there is really a psychology for normal people. And we will try to explain it tonight in this lecture. First of all, by showing the difference between knowing and loving. And then showing the difference in knowing and loving between man and woman. First of all, our soul has two faculties. One faculty is the faculty of knowing. The other is the faculty of loving. We are like an animal inasmuch as we have sensations and passions, but this is something which is specifically human. Knowing belongs to man's intellect or reason. Loving belongs to our will. The object of the intellect is truth. The object of the will is goodness or love. Now they both operate in quite a different fashion. This is how our intellect operates. Whenever our intellect knows anything, it always brings it down to the level of our intellect. Suppose, for example, a teacher, must be many teachers listening, they often have the experience of explaining some abstract principle to children. They always have to do that in concrete terms. If the child is to know and understand, the principle must be brought down to the level of the child's intellect. That is why sometimes when we want to memorize something, we make an association in our intellect. It's something that we know. I remember once I was to meet a man with the name of Lummick, and someone in my office said, now, try to remember that name, because I'm very poor at remembering names. And the secretary said, now, just remember that his name rhymes with stomach. Do you know what I called him? Kelly. You take something very simple that is known. Take a flower in a crannied wall. Well, you bring that up into an intellect like Tennyson's, and it comes out as a poem. The flower in the crannied wall, if I knew what you are, root and all, I should know what God and man is. So the object of the intellect is in itself. Now notice the difference with the will. The will always goes out to meet the object that it loves. If, for example, you love music, you have to meet the demands of music. If you study a foreign language, you have to go out to meet the demands of that language. If, for example, a young man is courting a woman and she loves poetry, well, he's very foolish if he tries to quote mathematics to her. Now, there is a profound difference between knowing and loving from this point of view also. My little angel is cleaning the backboard. I had a little conference with him beforehand. He said that he was going to do everything very, very quick tonight because I was talking about spiritual faculties. Here is another law of the intellect or reason. Whenever the mind knows anything that is below it, it elevates that thing by knowing it. Whenever it knows anything that is above it in dignity, it to some extent degrades it. Now let us take, for example, the knowledge of a scientist. A scientist gives us physics, biology, or our mind, as we know the birds and the flowers and the trees, draws all of these things into itself. And the mind gives them a new kind of existence, a new kind of being. We spiritualize the whole lower universe. That was the reason that wise old Aristotle said that the mind of man is a microcosmos, a little universe containing the whole world within itself. And as it knows things that are below it, it ennobles them. That is the basis of the Jewish hymns of praise. For example, the Psalms of David and the Benedicite, the three youths in the fiery furnace. God is praised for the clouds, the sky, the oceans, the mountains, and everything in the universe. This is incidentally the nobility of human knowledge. The fact that it spiritualizes everything that is below the mind. Now when you come to something that is above the mind in dignity, then it's degraded because we have to pull it down to our level. For example, you are listening. What does my angel look like? It's hard to picture an angel. My angel has a 21-inch wing spread. You try to bring the knowledge of God down to your intellect. It's almost impossible. That is why we have to, in the natural order, negate many things about earth in order to know God. Incidentally, that was one of the fine insights of the play, was it not, Green Pastures, where God appeared as just a common figure on the stage. No attempt to approximate deity. It's always good theater, therefore, in a movie, for example, not to show the person of Christ, because one would miss his divinity by making him purely human. Now, we come to the will. And here, the operation is just the contrary, because we said the will always draws everything to itself. When the will loves anything that is below it, it degrades itself. Take, for example, suppose the primary love of man was money. Man would become like gold, cold, and hard, and yellow. Suppose it's carnality, just living for the pleasures of the flesh alone. Man degrades himself because we always become like that which we love. A man loves alcohol, he becomes an alcoholic. Degrades himself, pulls himself down by loving that which is beneath him. If a man loves something that is above him, then he becomes a noble. That is why it is important for youth, and for everyone, in fact, to have the right kind of ideals and the right kind of heroes, because we tend to imitate them. Whom do we love? A player of a percussion instrument? Is he an ideal? A moaner? A soldier? A patriot? A saint? You can readily see, the higher the love, the more human dignity is lifted up. That is why, to a great extent, the level of any civilization is the level of its womanhood. Because when a man loves a woman, he has to be worthy of her. The higher she is in virtue, in nobility of character, truth and justice and goodness, the more a man has to aspire to be worthy of her. History of civilizations could actually be written in terms of the level of woman. Now this is the difference between knowing and loving, and this helps answer a riddle, or not a riddle, but a question sometimes people ask. Why is it that very learned people are not religious? Now that question must not point to the fact that people who are religious are not intellectual. But we must remember that the intellect and the will operate in different ways. The intellect draws something to itself, and the will always goes out to that which it loves. I'll take, for example, a chief of police. Does a chief of police know anything about robbery? He certainly has a fine knowledge of robbery. He knows how to get into banks. He knows how to break into houses. Probably the chief of police has most of the burglar's tools. But does he ever rob? No, he does not love robbery. See, there's no intrinsic connection between the two. Take, for example, the train announcer. Does a train announcer know where the train goes? Yes. Does he ever go there? No. And so it's possible, as you see, for people to know something about any particular science or art and still not love. Thomas Aquinas said, the least love of God is worth more than the knowledge of all created things. This has been a very abstract lesson so far, and I hope now that we can make it a little concrete, and it will be a little more concrete if we tell you that now we're going to be concerned with the difference between a man and a woman in knowing and in loving. I hope that I start no disputes in families this evening. The first difference between a man and a woman is that a man is concerned principally with things and a woman with persons. That's the first difference. Hence a man is much more interested in business than a woman. A man's interest is much more remote. A woman's interest is more immediate. A man's interest is the abstract. A woman's is more concrete and intimate. A man is concerned with ends and goals and purposes. A woman is more concerned with something that is very proximate and close and near and dear to her. And because a woman is more interested in persons, a woman is much more inclined to gossip. That is not necessarily a fault any more than talking about business. Ever notice, hear a conversation of men on a train? Almost always business. As for gossip, the woman doesn't need to believe everything she hears, but at least she believes she can repeat it. And it is this that causes sometimes misunderstandings. For example, a man will come home from the office full of business. And he will say, listen, dear, today I got an order for 250,000 nuts and bolts. We were the only factory that was able to supply those in Greater Manhattan. You know what his wife will say? Dear, how do you want your eggs? And then the other way around. Man is reading the newspaper. The woman comes in, the wife comes in and says, Notice anything new? Why is it, after thousands of years of civilization, husbands have never been able to pick out hairdos and new hats? Now, though there is this difference, understand they complement one another, and very beautifully. After all, this is the future, and this is the present, and both are needed to make a happy family. A second difference between the love of a man and the love of a woman is that a man will always give reasons for loving. A woman gives no reasons for loving. I must be right on this one. For example, a man will say, "Oh, you're beautiful. I love you because your teeth are pearly." And a woman just says, "I love you." Her heart is autonomous. Man's reason is always mixed up, his love is always mixed up with his reason. Men generally write the love song. That's why I love you. You're the cream in my coffee. You're the salt in my stew. You're my Vendel bonnet. You're my Shakespeare sonnet. You're my Mickey Mouse. They're not very good reasons for loving, but at least there they are. And I'll ask my angel not to erase that in order that we can follow the three reasons. A woman never tells you why she loves. She just tells you how. Take, for example, this beautiful poem of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. I'm sure you're familiar with it. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach. And feeling out of sight for the ends of being an ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need. By sun and candlelight. I love thee freely as men strive for right. I love thee purely as they turn from praise. I love thee with a passion put to use in my old grief and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with a love I seem to lose with my lost saints. I love thee with a breath, smiles, tears of all my life. And if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. This also explains why in a dispute between the two, a man will resort to logic and the woman will resort to tears. A third difference is that defects mar a man's love. Defects do not hurt a woman's love. A man hears somebody talk about a woman that he loves or that he's going to marry, and he'll say, "Well, after all, I've got to know that woman, and I better listen to this." But a woman won't listen. She knows the man has defects. She loves him anyway. Remember the popular song? That's my Bill. He's a good-for-nothing blankety blank blank blank, but he's my Bill anyway. And I believe that there's something maybe divine in that kind of love because God loves us that way. Despite all of our defects and despite all of our failings. And coming then to a summary of knowledge and love, At the beginning, we never can love anybody or anything unless we know that person or know that thing. That is why there has to be, say, an introduction first, before there can be the beginning of love. But then after a time, love creates knowledge. How often that happens, for example, in an enduring marriage of a husband and wife. They know one another's moods and attitudes and fears and joys without ever a word being spoken. They've loved one another so deeply that they have created a new kind of knowledge. And so in order to love God, we must first know Him. But then, once we know Him, we can begin to love Him. And that opens up an entirely new field of knowledge that in its greatest height, the mystic alone understands. And what is true of religion is true of something that is allied to it, namely patriotism. We need only to know just a little bit about this great country of ours in order to love it. And please God, under the inspiration of a little bit of faith and loyalty, we'll all begin to love it much more than we do. God.